Hell yeah. On today's show, the doctor is in from Northeast Wrestling, Invictus Wrestling, and Fight Life Pro Wrestling. Please welcome Landon Hale.
Hey, thank you for having me, Mike. It's so great to be here. I'm really glad that we get to have this interview. And, like you said, the doctor is in. And, I am a chiropractor, the good doctor. So for everyone out there, watch your back.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Mike Grand Show, and today's special guest is pro wrestler Landon Hale from Northeast Wrestling, Invictus Wrestling, Fight Life Pro Wrestling, and a whole bunch of other promotions. The doctor is in. Hey Landon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having me. How are you doing today?
Good, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Just very thankful that you have me on here.
You're welcome. So the first question I got to ask you is, you're from Kentucky, right?
Yep, I have a little bit of a Southern accent, even though I'm in Massachusetts, but yes, I am from Kentucky.
Okay, tell us a little bit what it was like growing up in Kentucky to start things off.
So growing up in my area of Kentucky, it's through, we live through the Appalachian Mountains. And so we're in between very high mountains. It's very country. It's a very small town area where I'm from. It's a little town called Harold, Kentucky. I usually say that I'm from Pikeville, Kentucky, because it's a bigger city, a bigger area. But our area is very small. It's your next door neighbor, the whole town. It's a very small community, but that's the way that I grew up. And, it's just now getting acquainted to like the bigger city lives and the bigger style of life, especially up in the Boston area. But no, I love it though. I've been there for 24 years of my life. And so I just couldn't be thankful to be raised in such a very hopeful and wholesome place.
Awesome. So tell us how you got involved in pro wrestling.
So when I was 5 years old, I watched WCW with my dad, and I was a big luchador fan. So I was a huge fan. I'm still a huge fan of Rey Mysterio, a fan of Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, Chris Jericho. My dad was more of the NWO type of style of wrestling, like the bigger heavyweight style of wrestling. And we grew up watching that. And unfortunately, he passed away at the age of, or whenever I was at 7 years old. And I grew apart from it. And then I guess a few years later, I happened to watch it again after, I believe it was like WrestleMania 20. So I finally got back into watching wrestling. My area of Kentucky, again, it's not so popular when it comes to, like the Northeast, for example. There's promotions everywhere, just like you mentioned, like Northeast Wrestling, Invictus, so on and so forth. There's promotions in the Southeast that you can name a bunch, like Action Wrestling, TWE, so on and so forth. But in the area of Kentucky, it's very rare that you see promotions that run professional wrestling. So years go by, and I'm finishing up, or I just finished up undergrad school, and I was getting ready to go down to Georgia for chiropractic school. And one of my friends is a local wrestler, and I asked him a bunch of questions on Facebook, and it was like comparing two wrestlers. And so I asked him that question. And then it just led to a string of like a bunch of questions stacked on top of that. And then all of a sudden I messaged him. I said, you know what? I have one life to live. Let's see where this takes me, because I was such a huge fan of it growing up. So I talked to him about it. And he said, if you want to get into wrestling, come over to my buddy's place, and we have a ring set up in the backyard, and we will, we'll take a few back bumps, and I'll, get you introduced to it. And I got introduced to the guy that had the ring set up. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. God rest his soul. Became a great friend of mine. He had the ring set up in his backyard. My buddy showed me, he was like, hey, this is the proper way to take bumps. And so I did. And I was sore the next day. Don't get me wrong. But it felt like I belonged there. And it was a weird feeling, but it was kind of hard to tell unless you actually, do it yourself. It's like, don't knock it till you try it, that sort of deal. So you fast forward about a month later, I got some training done in St. Paul, Virginia, under a guy by the name of Mike Sampson. and he was training me. He trained me about a couple of times, and then I had my first ever match August 11th of 2018. So I just surpassed my 5-year wrestling anniversary, and I had my first ever match. It was awful, but hey, you got to start somewhere, just like anybody else. It was a great time, and then I was training there for another couple of months before I moved to Georgia for chiropractic school. Then when I got down there, I was getting acclimated with chiropractic school because it is a doctorate program. So becoming a doctor requires a lot of studying, a lot of hard work on that side of thing, on the educational portion. So I backed off a little bit of just wrestling in general, but I was still going to training, and I was trained under Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express. So when I was training under him for about 3 months, again, first thing that they tell you in wrestling is always have your gear with you just in case of something happens. And the first show that I ever attended of Robert Gibson's, which was called All Pro Championship Wrestling, which APCW, and that's what he was running in Douglasville, Georgia. Someone didn't show up, and then they asked me if I had my gear. It wasn't anything too crazy, but I ended up making my debut on a day that I shouldn't have. And Robert Gibson came to the back and he hugged me, said I did a great job. And then ever since then, I was under his wing for about 2.5 years, trained a little bit under AR Fox. And then back in March of 2022, me and my wife, we graduated from chiropractic school at Life University. We moved up here to Massachusetts because that's where she's from. And now I'm currently at New England Pro Wrestling Academy, just making sure I keep that sword sharpened. And, they've been taking really good care of me, making sure that I get everything down. And now the rest is history.
What are some of the important skills that you learned while you were training that you still carry with you today?
Always, and this is just in life in general, but always be respectful to others. No one will ever understand what someone else is going through. So if you give someone a hard time just because it's whatever's going on in their life, don't take it personal. Just still be respectful, still be the person that you are, still help with whatever is needed, still make sure you listen. Always pay the dues when needed, because you're never guaranteed that star spotlight. Everyone's got to start somewhere. And then it's always about the respect at the end of the day, because nowadays you see a lot of people, they act like they give you the cold shoulder, or they're very disrespectful to you. And it's just, you always carry yourself with pride and who trained you. And that carries a long way considering who you're trained under. So it's a reflection of them as well. So I try to make sure to still be respectful as much as I can.
Yep. And can you tell us how you got your character developed? Was that something that somebody, gave you a character, or did you develop it yourself and expanded upon it? What made you decide to go with the character that you are in the ring?
So, and I think everyone has different ways of looking at characters. You look back at wrestling in WWE and TNA back in like the early 2000s when I grew up watching it. You have characters that they didn't really have somewhat of a gimmick, where it was like so heavy, like, it worked for people like the Undertaker or Kane, so on and so forth. But you had a lot of people that they evolved into a 3D image of, who they really are, like a real life self. And, you still have these little portraying characters of how it gets presented. So when I was first getting into wrestling, and, even for a few years, I was just going off the basis of, just being able to talk on the mic and then just being able to wrestle well. And I will say, shout out to Max Caster, because I had a good conversation with him. I think it was last year. We had a wrestling match, and then he was telling me that, it's always about, like you think of it as like a web diagram, where like you have like one focal point. When people think of Max Caster, the first thing that comes to their head is that he's a rapper. So you have like a lot of these, characters that come in. So I'm looking deep into myself, and I worked hard to be a chiropractor. So I'm thinking chiropractors are good doctors. They go in and they make adjustments. They're very safe when it comes to stuff like that. And I was thinking about it as well. One of the promoter of a Scenic City Invitational, he's a good friend of mine, Scott Hensley. We were talking one day, and he's like, you should just call yourself the good doctor. And that kind of like can help portray, that character of, hey, you are a chiropractor, but then I can use everything else on top of that as well to make myself who I am. So that's where everything comes from.
What's your favorite move to do in the ring? Because obviously you have to learn a lot of moves in professional wrestling. Do you have a favorite move?
Yeah. So my favorite move, my favorite overall, how do I say it? My favorite move that I like to use a lot is the Spanish Fly, which it was created by the SAT, the Spanish Announce Team. But my favorite move to use right now is called the SPO driver, and that's my finishing move. And that's when someone's up in an electric chair, and then rather than going down into a one-winged angel like what Kenny Omega does, I set them out to a side like a Emerald Fusion. So, and it's called the SPO driver because back in March of this year, there's a referee that was traveling all over the independent scene, mostly on the IWTV platform out of Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky area. His name was Sean Patrick O'Brien. We called him SPO, and he unfortunately passed away due to an allergic reaction at the age of like 32 or 33. And he was really close to all of us. And so when I went down to the Scenic City Invitational, and I was able to, utilize that move in honor of him. And so that's my favorite move because I know that he's always going to be with me. So I prefer that.
And you were mentioning how you went into the ring pretty quickly after training. Typically, how long does somebody train before they actually have their first match? And tell us more about your first match that first night when you had to go out there when you unexpectedly had to do that.
So it varies with people because when we look at an average time span of wrestlers, sometimes it may take them 5 to 6 months. It may take them 3 months. It may take them 1 month. It may even take them 2 training courses like I did. Like I took 2 training classes and then I was straight in there. It may take people a year, over a year, 2 years. It's a small stepping stone, no matter the range of like how long it takes. But then that's when you realize, hey, this is how you get comfortable in the ring, because now it's again that practice makes perfect. And now it's like, hey, we trained so much, and now it's let's go out there and see how you do. So so in Kentucky, you have to have a license in order to wrestle. And so when I had my license, I was like, okay, I can wrestle now. A lot of people that were supposed to be on this first show that I went to, it was like a July show. I ended up not getting on, and I was kind of bummed about it. Obviously, it's not that big of a deal or in the world. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to show up at the August 11th show that was happening. And I was like, okay, let's see what happens here, because there was a championship wrestling tournament that they were having. So I pulled up, and one of the promoters came up to me and she said, hey, do you have your Kentucky license? I said, yes. And she said, okay, you're going to be a referee. Obviously, you have to start from somewhere. So I was kind of bummed out about it. I was like, okay, just kind of going on and, just help setting up the ring and doing whatever. And I was still thank these 2 guys, JT Walker and Eric Porter. And that's because, they're local wrestlers in the Kentucky scene. But when we set the ring up, they were saying, okay, we're going to go do some training a little bit because we're going to see how everything holds up or see how everyone does. And when I got in the ring, they were kind of like going through the basics with me, and they were really impressed with what I could do at that moment. And then they're like, hey, you're going to be on the show. Don't worry about being a ref. And so I ended up having not only my first match, and then I won that match, but I ended up going to the next round, even though I lost. Very basic, very simple match, but that's how it came to be. And then from then on out, the rest was history.
Okay. And I just had a thought right now that I should have mentioned a little earlier, but you were talking about respect, right? And It's very interesting because I don't know if you know her or not. Do you know a wrestler by the name of Jessie Jones?
Jessie Jones. I've heard the name, but I don't know her.
She's in WOW Women of Wrestling, and she's from Bardstown, Kentucky. I completely forgot about that. I have interviewed a Kentucky person before. So you're actually the second one. And she is big on respect in the ring. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's kind of cool that the 2 Kentucky wrestlers are big on respect.
That's awesome. Yeah, Bardstown is, I believe, the opposite side of Kentucky. So I'm more East Kentucky. I believe she would be more Central West Kentucky. But that's really cool, though.
Yep. And now tell me, I mentioned some of the promotions you wrestled for, but you wrestled for a lot of them. Can you give us some names of some of the other promotions you've wrestled for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've wrestled for Wrestling Open. I've wrestled for Action Wrestling, which they're down in Tyrone, Georgia. They're amazing people. I just wrestled in the Scenic City Invitational, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. TWE, I've wrestled for them. I wrestled for Lariato Pro Wrestling, which is in Georgia as well, and that used to be ran by Doc Gallows before he went back to the WWE. I also wrestled for Pro Wrestling Union, which I'm actually wrestling in a triple threat match September 2nd. I know we'll talk about that again as well. I am making a couple of debuts that have not been announced yet, so I'm going to keep that on the low. Obviously, Northeast Wrestling, they're probably one of the, if not the top promotion in the Northeast. Invictus Pro Wrestling, I'm getting ready to debut for We Are Wrestling, and I was actually supposed to debut for them back in November of last year, and unfortunately, that's when I had, the surgery on my wrist, and so I was out for a little bit. But things happen. You go on from there. Fight Life, I've been wrestling for them, and then I believe that is it as of now that I can think of. So again, there's a couple of debuts to look out for. So I'm just trying to get as many places as I can, but those are like the main places that I've been wrestling at so far.
Yep, and you were a heavyweight champion for All Pro Championship Wrestling, correct?
Yes, that was my first time. It was November of 2019, and that was like the first ever winning gold, and it's especially under someone as high up there as Robert Gibson, but also someone that's been under someone that's a general manager under there, which is my favorite general manager ever, Teddy Long, because I grew up watching him in the early 2000s. So just seeing that moment come all together, it brought tears to my eyes. And then and then COVID happened, and then I ended up dropping it before COVID, and then whenever we came back from it, it was vacant at the time, and so I ended up becoming a 2-time heavyweight champion. And then I also became Pro Wrestling Union heavyweight champion in June of 21. So I had a few gold belts, but I'm ready to stack up some more across this waist.
Yep. And you also won a #1 contender battle royal as well. Now, my favorite matches are always the battle royals because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to get eliminated first, who's going to win. I think those matches are so fun. So tell me what it's like being in battle royals.
It's fun. It's never. It gets very chaotic. It's a lot of chaos. There's just a lot that happens when it comes to battle royals, because it's not a full-on match. It's not a singles. It's not a tag. It's not a triple threat. Literally anything goes, and it's literally every person for themselves. So that way they can, get that spot, or they can get that #1 contender spot. So it's pretty. It's one of my favorite matches, so to say, just to throw people over the top rope. That's always a given. So that's why I like the Royal Rumble a lot. So
yeah, those matches are always fun. So you just made your Invictus Wrestling debut about this time last August, correct?
Exactly.
Tell us about what it's like wrestling for them.
They are great. I love them. They gave me a chance. And again, when it comes to wrestling, and I'm sure this is for anyone that's wrestling in like for any promotion, they're always thankful for the opportunities given. And even when I was in Georgia, they were like, I was in talks with them before I graduated from school, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like wait till you're up in this way more, so we could be able to stay connected and be able to, work with you easier." I'm like, absolutely. And then they've been in touch with me ever since. And I had my match against Nikolai White last year, and that was a great match. I'm ready for a rematch. That kid has a lot of talent. And then I ended up wrestling Ken Broadway, which I believe they were supposed to air it on August 4th, but then the date ended up getting moved due to it being outside and the weather was going to be bad. So we ended up having it August 11th, which was last week on Friday. And so I think they're trying to find a date to air it. But it was me against Ken Broadway for the grand championship. And let's say it's definitely something you want to tune into, because that's probably one of my favorite matches of this year.
So what brought you over here to the Northeast? Was it wrestling or the chiropractor work, or just you decided you want to change a pace?
Chiropractic work and my wife. And so my wife and I, we met during COVID. So she's also a chiropractor, but also a bartender on the side. So when I wasn't being a chiropractor and wrestler when she wasn't, being a chiropractor and bartender during COVID. That's how we came together, because during those times our lives were so busy that it kind of life gets in the way and we just do whatever we want. So we came together. She's from the Massachusetts area, so she said, "Hey, I want to move up here." Obviously, like dating through, and before we got married, she was like, "I want to move up to Massachusetts," and I said, "Absolutely." So that's something that we'd have to talk about, and now we're up here in the Northeast. So that's how it came to be. And the good thing too is that I know Northeast is a hotbed when it comes to wrestling, because there's really good promotions. Like I said, Action, PWU, TWE, there's a lot of good promotions. But when it comes to the Northeast, it seems like there's multiple promotions in just a state alone in the Northeast, in the New England area. So it's really, it's a lot to choose from. So I'm in a really good place. So I killed two birds with one stone, being able to move up here and do chiropractic work while being married, and then being able to wrestle a few times throughout the weekends here in the Northeast.
So how did you get contacted and get into Northeast wrestling?
So Northeast wrestling, Michael Lombardi actually hit me up, and I've actually reached out to him multiple times while I was in Georgia. And when I moved up to the Northeast, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we would be interested in having you." And this was before my injury. And then during my injury, obviously, I really didn't do much. And so while I was on the shelf, I said, "You know what? I want to go to the top place of New England. So I want to be able to, go to Northeast Wrestling." And I was there with the cast on, and I was helped setting up, I was helped tearing down, I was helped doing what's needed to do, such as, tear off tickets, make sure everyone got to their seats safely, just stuff like that. And I did that from December all the way up until April. And then he saw the hard work that I put in. So he said, "You know what, let's give you a chance." And so ever since then, it's been a heck of a run. I just got finished again wrestling. And I told you before we came on air. So I wrestled in Bethany. I had my first win in Bethany at their last show until they come back from renovations, or if they find another building, against Vargas last Saturday. And then Sunday I was in an 8-man tag, and I got to wrestle in New Jersey at the Six Flags Arena. So that was pretty cool. So I'm just really thankful for them, and shout out to Northeast Wrestling.
And then also, you're still wrestling across the country, correct? Because you were in the Scenic City Invitational this year in Chattanooga.
Yep. And I will say that was one of the top, if not the top tournament on my list that I wanted to attend and wanted to be a part of. I was in the 2021 Future Showcase, and this was kind of like a smaller tournament that they had during the day through that weekend. And obviously, unfortunately, I didn't make it all the way, but it still showcased what I can do, and it kind of put eyes on me in that sense of like, okay, this kid's good. Let's see where this takes him. And then you fast forward 2 years later, I get the call saying, "Hey, you're a part of the Scenic City Invitational this year." I just got back from my wrist injury, and I'm like, okay, I'm more determined than ever to get the best shape possible, and then to go down there to show what I can do. And not only did I go down there and show what I could do, but I also split the back of my head, had 6 staples in the back of my head, blood bleeding, or blood dripping down the back of my spine. And I was able to perform and become a runner-up. It wasn't the result that I wanted, but it shows that I can compete with 15 of the best others that this country has to offer when it comes to independent wrestling. So that only showcased what I could do for the future. So I wasn't the winner of the Scenic City, but I felt like during that time, I felt like the MVP of that tournament. So I was really thankful, and I'm really blessed. And so shout out to Matt Griffin, shout out to Dylan Hills, and shout out to Scott Hensley for the opportunity.
And you were the runner-up, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And unfortunately, you did get injured in that. Was that the first injury you ever had, or have you been injured before?
So again, I had the wrist injury right here. I've had like little smaller like tweaks and stuff like that. Nothing to the point of having to sit out for a long period of time. There was one point in 2021, I was in training, and then the next morning, like I guess I took a wrong bump, but the next morning I woke up and I had crazy headaches and migraines, and something was going on, and I couldn't just, like, sometimes I would get adjusted, and sometimes it would kind of like calm it down, but it was still like throbbing. It could have been I've landed on something wrong. So I ended up, I was out for like a month, and then I was back at it. But my serious injury was I fractured my scaphoid bone, which is one of the wrist bones or one of the wrist bones is more so on the thumb side. And if there's not enough blood supply that can go to it, you can get arthritis in your wrist at a very early age. So I ended up having to have surgery, and I was on the shelf from late September of last year up until I want to say February was when I was in the cast, and then I started doing OT, and then I came back to my to wrestling. I want to say it was like April when I debuted for Northeast Wrestling. So that was the only injury that I had. Other than that, knock on wood. Hopefully, I mean, I'm sure there's little minor things, but no. When I was in the Scenic City match, they had chairs that were like thick pew chairs. They're like wooden, and they also have like the corners. So obviously, it wasn't like the fold up chairs. I took a dive from Eli Knight in the first round, and it was close to the ring. So you can just imagine the proximity where the ring is right here, the wall's right here, and then just a little bit further out, there's some chairs right here. And as I came down, I hit the back of my head, and I was split open. I wrestled through the rest of the match. Went to the hospital or went to the emergency room. Got 6 staples put in my head. They said I could wrestle if everything was good. Wrestled the next night throughout the rest of the tournament, and I mean, even not at 100%, I came up runner up. So I still take that any day of the week.
Yeah, that's the one unfortunate thing is just the injuries sometimes. Was that something that you considered when thinking about starting your wrestling career? If you got injured?
Yes, and it's one of those, because again, when I had my wrist injury, I couldn't do my job, which is to be a chiropractor, and I couldn't do that from September up until February. I was still able to do other stuff like, take patient exams, do x-rays, stuff like that. But there's no way that I could have easily done adjustments because it requires bending of my wrist. And I mean, I'm still having to get some motion into my wrist anyways, but I mean, I'm still able to move and stuff like that. So it's going to take some time. But yeah, I know the consequences that come with it, but I just have to be smarter with what I do and what I don't do in the ring. Knock on wood for not many serious injuries during my chiropractic career.
Yep. And now you're headed to South Carolina later this year on September 2 as part of the Pro Wrestling Union. You're going to have a triple threat match, correct? Tell us who's in that match and what's going on there.
Yes, so it's a triple threat match against a guy by the name of Chase Emery. He goes by the Blue Chipper. He has a high school and collegiate amateur wrestling background. I fought him before back in 2021 when I still had the heavyweight championship belt. He's a tough competitor, so I know that he's going to bring it his all for this next time around. And then the other guy that's in it, his name is, I'm sure you've heard of him, Impact Wrestling's John Schuyler. And he's someone that I've been wanting to wrestle since I have been making it around the Southeast a little bit more, and then getting to know that name of John Schuyler because he's a great guy that's been wrestling for so many years, and he's finally getting that shot of being on TV and wrestling under a contract. So I'm really glad and happy for him. This triple threat match, the winner gets a #1 contender shot for the PWU United Heavyweight Championship. And this is for any time in the future. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a Money in the Bank contract, but it's more so of a guaranteed opportunity for that shot. So all I got to say is they got to watch their backs.
And now, how important is it, the feedback from the fans when you go to the show? Like, do you meet and interact with the fans, and do they give you this adrenaline rush when you're out there in the ring? What is the importance of the fans for you?
The importance of the fans is the #1 key with wrestling. It is one of the #1 keys of wrestling, because you're not going out there to perform for yourself. You're performing for those that have the faith in you. Big shout out to Joey G. He's had faith in me since I was first down in Georgia, and he found out that I was moving up to the Northeast. Shout out to him. He's been a fan of mine since, I guess, for a few years now, so I'm really thankful for him. The Northeast wrestling crowd, they have been amazing. And then just people that follow me on just social media in general, and that come to some of these shows that are local. I'm just really thankful for the fans that actually have faith in me, because all I want to do is just wrestle, perform, and show that I can be a worthy of not just a champion, but just a wrestler in general for them.
Now, since you're also a fan of pro wrestling, I got to ask you, how many shows have you been to? Have you gone out and watched some pro wrestling events around the country besides ones that obviously, you're a part of? Have you went and seen any live shows anywhere?
When it comes to like TV shows, obviously, I've been to the last show that I went to was NXT when they came. I think it was Great American Bash, I believe. Wait, was it? I think it was Great American Bash or Vengeance. Or it's one of those pay-per-views that came to Lowell, Massachusetts, because that's around the area that I'm in. So I went to watch that show, and it was great. Other than that, I really like, besides wrestling, going to the shows and actually wrestling, it's kind of hard to actually say like I actually went to a show and watched wrestling as a fan. So it's been a little bit, but I have been to a few places in the South to just show up and watch wrestling. I have been maybe to like one or two shows up here that's televised wrestling. So it's been scarce, but whenever I do, I make the most of it.
And do you keep up with any of the wrestling programs now on television?
I used to. I don't have cable, so when my wife and I, when we moved up here, we were staying at our grandparents' house, which they have a summer house in Maine. So this gave us a little bit of time to stay there while we find a place of our own, which we do now. And they had cable television, so I was like, okay, like I can get back to watching the storylines and watching stuff from WWE, AEW, so on and so forth. And then when we moved here, we didn't buy any cable, so I just keep up with what's going on Twitter. Like I still see the stuff that's going on, but I don't watch anything else in that particular notice. But I do watch a lot of stuff on IWTV just to keep up with today's independent wrestlers and seeing the competition that's out there.
Who is your dream match from any promotion? Do you have a dream match that you're hoping to have one day?
Someone asked me this question, and I have a few. So there's dream. And I'll put this in a perspective of I think both of these bubbles are realistic, but I want to put a higher chance versus a lower chance. And this is as of right now, not saying that it could change in the future. Higher chance, people like Nick Wayne, Jordan Oliver, TJ Crawford, Alec Price, so on. And like you can name all these indie professional wrestlers on this side. Then you have these guys over here that are also signed, but they sometimes do independent work, but it kind of takes a little bit. So my number one match is against Will Ospreay. That's my number one opponent ever. Right below that is Bandito. Right below that is Ray Phoenix. Then Penta. And then I would like to wrestle Chris Jericho. I mean, I know that. I think he's still in his prime. You never say that you're seasoned or whatever, but I think that would be a good match. And also, I've watched him in WCW, like I said. So the fact that, if that could be a dream match, that would be awesome. But yes, I'd probably say Will Ospreay number one. But if any dream match of any scenario that anything can happen, Rey Mysterio and AJ Styles up there.
Now, what advice would you give someone who would want to become a wrestler?
Mouths closed, ears open. Reason being is that a lot of people, they come in, they think they have the idea of what wrestling is all about. That's what happened to me the first time, and I always thought that I knew everything. I'm not saying that I knew everything. I showed respect and stuff like that, but I was thinking, okay, maybe let's do this, and then I realized, okay, I need to pump on the brakes a little bit, because that's not how it goes. Just like any structure, you have to have a very solid base, and then from there you build your way up. And so it's all about the respect at the end of the day. Learn from your mentors, be respectful to others, and then just keep working hard like you would. It sounds like a cliche thing, but work hard. That's like I've worked hard my whole life. I guess when I was little, playing basketball and baseball, thinking that it was going to get me somewhere. And then now, I tried pro wrestling. It came natural to me, and I was really thankful that I've been working hard to get where I'm at. And so it's just all about the work ethic and the respect that you put in, and then the rest will come naturally. Because nowadays people say, hey, like, don't you want to wrestle here? Don't you want to wrestle there? It's like, I do, but I want it to be natural. I don't want it to be forced, because I feel like if I force things, I'm just not going to enjoy it at the end of the day.
Now, do you have ambitions to also one day make it to one of the other leagues like AEW or WWE?
I do. It's a little difficult with me being a chiropractor, and that's just because if I was to wrestle for so long that I go down to, like if I go somewhere and they're like, oh, like we want you to be on WWE, for example, but you have to go through the NXT portion of it, I'd have to move to Florida. I would have to see about, what days would offer, XYZ, if it would fit with my chiropractic schedule. With AEW, it's a little bit more flexible, but right now, I don't have any desire to, at least I wouldn't say like any desire. That's a strong word to use, and I don't want to, put that off there. But if someone came up to me and offered me a contract, it's more so of just sitting down and looking over everything. Because if it was with someone like AEW and it's just like Collision every Saturday, or if it's Impact Wrestling where they're on the road and they do tapings every, like once a month for, some weekends, MLW, there's a lot of, or New Japan, stuff like, and they do it in America. There's a lot of different scenarios, but right now I'm focused on being a chiropractor first, and then making sure, because I'm employed under someone, so they have my first full attention until something happens. And they're like, hey, we got this for you. And then we kind of sit down and talk about it. So if someone came up to me and offered me a contract and it works well with my schedule, then you bet that I would sign it.
So just like now you were mentioning that you're a chiropractor, which we all know. So tell us a little bit about being a chiropractor and what got you into that field.
I love it. It is the most rewarding. It is the most rewarding thing that I could ever be a part of. Like, it's the most rewarding field to be a part of. So I got into it. So back in, I want to say, so 2012, I graduated from high school. I went to my room and I thought that I had these dreams of playing, again, like I mentioned before, playing basketball, playing baseball, thinking it was going to get me somewhere. Unfortunately, it didn't. I went to my room, and the first thing I did, I cried in my bed. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mom came in there. She's my big support system. And she was like, hey, what you need to do is, you need to go to this local community college. And what we need you to do is see what basic stuff that you can do, and just kind of go from there. So it went from undecided to math major to science major, going down the physical therapy route. And then when I went to Morehead State University, that's where I went for undergrad. I was taking my courses. There's a few things I didn't like about it, and there's nothing against physical therapy. We love it in our office that people go and do. They do stuff for physical therapy to help with their shoulders, with their knees, with their hips, et cetera, et cetera. I went to see a chiropractor for my low back injury, and then I went to see a chiropractor for about maybe a couple months. It changed my life, looked deeper into it, and then that's when I decided to move down to Georgia to Life University, and then went to school there for about 3.5 years. And then now here I am working under my boss in Westboro, Massachusetts. It's called Meininger Family Chiropractic. And let me tell you, it's very rewarding when you get to adjust people, educate them about chiropractic care, and then seeing their lives change for the better good. So I'm just very thankful and very blessed to see that can change people's lives.
Now, tell me 3 things that maybe people don't know about you. 3 fun facts.
3 fun facts. I'm learning Japanese. It's on halt right now, but I do know like 1% of Japanese. Is nothing too crazy. I can sing. I've been singing since I was 7 years old, and I also play piano.
Okay, awesome. And now it is time to play the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a couple things and you just tell me which one you prefer.
Okay, sounds good. Hit me with it.
So are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm a little bit of both, but I would probably say night owl.
Roller coaster or bumper cars?
Roller coaster.
Ping pong or air hockey?
Ping pong.
Are you Mr. Fix-It, or do you have to have somebody fix it for you?
A little bit of both, but more on the someone fix it for me.
Okay, this one I think you already answered for us, but would you rather participate in a karaoke contest or a dance contest?
Karaoke contest.
Growth or security?
Growth.
Better superpower, invisible or be able to fly?
Be able to fly.
What's worse, leg day or arm day?
Leg day.
Would you rather be clever or driven?
Driven.
Would you rather be on Earth or Mars?
Earth.
Pictionary or Scrabble?
Scrabble.
And would you rather float like a butterfly or sting like a bee?
Sting like a bee.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Can you tell everybody what your social media is so they can follow you? And tell us about those upcoming appearances again so we can all, reach out to those places and follow you.
Of course. So you can follow me on Facebook now, and this is something that I tell the viewers all the time, is that I do have a personal and a public figure Facebook page. I prefer it unless you're a friend of mine, please follow the public figure page. It's not the fact that I love my fans to death, but I prefer my personal life to be separated from my wrestling life, even though it's the same name. So if you wouldn't mind giving that a follow on Facebook. Instagram, it's Landon Hale 3. On Twitter, that's where I'm at majority of the time. You can follow me at Hale 3. You can watch some of my matches on YouTube. I also have shirts for the Good Doctor and a bunch of other shirt products at www.prowrestlingtees.com/Landon Hale. The next show that I'm going to be at, it'll be September 1st. I can't announce it because it hasn't been announced yet. September 2nd, I will be at Pro Wrestling Union, and that's going to be in South Carolina. September 8th, I will be at We Are Wrestling, and that's going to be in the Bronx, New York. And then I will be also wrestling September 23rd, but I'm not, and I can't mention that either because they haven't announced it yet. And that is it so far as upcoming dates. But just, again, go to Twitter, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, and I update everyone on my appearances and where I'm going to be at next. So as a Good Doctor, just watch your back.
Okay, awesome. But they can't go to Twitter because it's called X now. They got to go to X.
Oh, yes, X.
Sorry. X, it's X. So, guys, you can follow me on X. It is at Mike Rand.com, C-O-M, like the website, MikeRand.com. Follow me on Facebook at Official Mike Rand, Instagram at Official Mike Rand, and of course on YouTube at The Mike Rand and at Official Mike Rand. So many places to keep up with me and Landon. We're going to have those sites for you at the end of this show. Thank you again so much for joining us here today, Landon.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome. And we will talk to you all soon. Bye, everybody.